Hi, this is Randy Smith with VicinityBrew. I want to keep our conversation going on with breweries of different sizes and their characteristics and some of their challenges. Starting off with a startup brewery. In my definition, I would call that a brewery under, say, 500 barrels a year. Some of the characteristics of that is there's a single production brewery. There's one brew house with a limited number of fermentation tanks, and the packaging would be pretty straightforward, typically starting with serving tanks and or kegs, maybe mobile canning, and when really aggressive getting to bottles. But it's a really simple, typically kegs that we're talking about in packaging. The employee count is small. So there might be a brewer, maybe somebody assisting in the cellar as it starts to grow a bit. And then if there's a tasting room, a couple of people managing the tasting room. And those people typically are interchangeable. So the brewer might be working a shift in the tasting room when they're not brewing. So the point here is small staff, limited financial resources. Oftentimes the bookkeeper, the person paying the bills, doing the cash deposits, doing taxes and things like that is an outside service. It might be in a family member. It might be somebody just on a contract basis that's picking up, but it's typically not an employee unless an existing brewery employee has those skills available. The beer portfolio is typically pretty limited. A flagship, maybe two, maybe doing some seasonals and one-offs. That will grow in time, but it's a pretty limited portfolio that are on the taps. The TTB reporting is pretty straightforward. It's quarterly. It can typically be done manually, and it's typically not a major issue, especially if you keep track of the brew logs and fermentation logs and just add them up at the end of the period. Probably the biggest system part of this to talk about is the point of sale. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that in some of the challenges and how some of those items are addressed. But I did want to point out the point of sale is probably going to be the biggest part because you're starting typically with a tasting room or a tap room, that type of thing, where you've got transactions, credit cards and split tabs and all those type of things. Anyway, so that's kind of the characteristics. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that come with that size brewery, as well as some of the software tools that you might be considering at that stage of a brewery. Anyway, hit the comments, follow along, and we'll keep this conversation going. Thanks.